Hi, it's Cory, and today we're going to talk about how to create your own strumming patterns. So a lot of people ask me how I come up with the different strumming patterns I made. I did just recently do a live stream that was a much more casual version of all the information I'm going to give you here. But if you're not interested in sitting through an hour live stream, this is the distilled version of it. In addition, I also have a guided note sheet that kind of has all of this information that you can put in your ukulele notebook or like use for your own reference too. And that is available on my Patreon. So if you're not already a member, you can check that out in the link is down in the description box below. If you are already a member, it's already available to you. So just go check it out on Patreon. And I would say too, while some of this will apply when it comes to coming up with like repetitive and easy picking patterns, that is going to be like a separate video that I make. So this is just strictly for strumming. But let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is just how to identify strumming patterns. Now, a lot of the way that we identify strumming patterns is fairly intuitive, but in case it's not, here's the really quick lowdown of it. For strumming patterns, we use a D most commonly to represent a down strum, and then a U to represent an up strum. If we are using a chuck, we often use an X, or at least that's what I use on my channel and what a lot of other channels use as well. This down and up U and D and X version, it's not what's typically used in most like published ukulele books and things. When it comes to professional published ones, they use bowing. People also will use numbers, and this is probably the least common version, but I think often a really useful thing that people should know is that a lot of times when it comes to certain types of strumming patterns, you can also use the counting numbers to represent that. A lot of times we do this with a number representing the down strum and an representing the up strum. That's not always the case, and sometimes depending on your time signature, that will vary, but that's also another way we can represent a strumming pattern. And then you can also use an up and down arrow to represent it too, so that's another way that we can represent the strumming pattern. If you're looking for more details on how to write out a strumming pattern, I do actually have an entire lesson dedicated to it in my Let's Play series. So if you're a brand new player, I really recommend checking that out. In every single episode of that Let's Play series also has a lesson, like a paper lesson, available on my Patreon or on Teachers Pay Teachers too. So all that's in the description box. Now, based on what I ended up talking about in my live stream, I kind of distilled everything into 6 main tips for when it comes to creating your own strumming pattern. The first thing is to just listen to the song. The thing I'm often trying to do is emulate whatever is going on with the other instrumentation going on in the song. So if I hear a really strong drum beat or a rhythm section, that's typically what I'm trying to emulate. I'm only using a ukulele in my play-alongs or in my tutorials, so I can't, make it sound like another instrument, but I can replicate the rhythm that it is playing. And so that's what I'm often trying to do. And when I'm thinking of that rhythm, I'm transferring that rhythm into up and down and chucks. So that is what I'm doing. So that's what you should be doing too. And in order to do this, it just takes you listening to the song. Don't go off of your memory. A lot of times our memory is not very reliable, so always go back and listen to the actual song. The second thing I would tell people is to think of the elements of music. Now, I like to think of these elements and put them into 8 different categories. Sometimes there's different variations, but these are the ones that are most common. And the ones that I always use and think of are melody, harmony, form, timbre, texture, rhythm, dynamics, and tempo. When I take those 8 elements, I then think about all of them individually and how they're represented in the song, especially when I'm trying to replicate something that was not originally made for ukulele into something that is still A, easy enough for beginners to play, and B, that still emulates the song enough that you could recognize it. I would also say a huge part of what makes, I think, the tutorials and my play-alongs work is that I'm relying heavily on melody being represented represented by my voice. So if you're somebody who's not as comfortable with singing, that can be a little bit trickier. And sometimes I think that is where people fall into the biggest issue, where they don't feel like it's a true representation of the song because they're missing the melody part. While all these different elements are really important, I would say the ones I think of the most when coming up with strumming patterns are going to be form, rhythm, and tempo. It's those three elements I think that play the biggest part when it comes to creating a strumming pattern. Form plays a huge part because I will often try to, in order to make the song a little bit more unique or a little bit more interesting to the ear, especially because mine are mostly beginner friendly and they're meant to be able to be played by like young ukulele students or people just starting out or / into the intermediate section, I will try to switch up what's going on listening wise with the form. My verses might have one strumming pattern and my chorus might have another strumming pattern. I find it's a lot easier to have a slightly more complex strumming pattern in the chorus as opposed to the verses, just because when it comes to the chorus, that's typically the part that everyone wants to jam out to, and you want to make sure you have a good driving force and that it's really representative of the song. That is, of course, unless you're going for like a very stripped down version or you're really trying to make it your own, and in that case, you don't really have to follow that rule. The rhythm section comes in with the actual strumming pattern. It's the rhythm in the original song and that's what I'm actually trying to emulate with the ups and the downs or the chucks. I find that if something is more acoustic sounding to begin with, I will not add a chuck. If something is like an electro pop beat or it has like a lot of drum in it, I will start to add chucks. The reason why is chucking is a percussive element, and so it's really easy to then associate that chuck with rhythm. So especially if I have a really good like thumping beat of some sort, I will try to emulate that with my chuck, and then my patterns, I'll be trying to emulate what other instrumentation is going on in the song. And finally, tempo is a big part of it too. Tempo is how fast or how slow the beat is in the song. A strumming pattern can sound completely different in a slower tempo as opposed to a faster tempo. Another thing you can do that really shocks me that people don't do is just writing out their patterns. I tell people all the time, have a ukulele practice journal. And a lot of times people are like, journaling doesn't work for me. It's not really journaling in the way that you have to talk about all your feelings. It's more of just writing down your stuff as if you were in a class and taking notes. As a teacher and as somebody who like specifically taught reading and study skills, taking notes is so important. If somebody tells you ever that like, oh, I never take notes and I'm just fine, that's great. Wonderful for you. Some people are really like auditory learners, or they can see it really, really well. Like writing things down is a completely different learning style. However, I would challenge that person, because if they were combining that style that was already working for them with writing things down and being reflective about it, I guarantee you will see results. There's a reason why professional musicians all over the world like reflect upon their learning. Now, maybe it's not a journal that you write down on paper. Maybe you're recording yourself on your phone and then making notes about it or making audio notes. There's a lot of different ways that you can practice journal that's not just the traditional like having a notebook and writing your stuff down in it, but you have to have something. Another thing you can do to either change existing strumming patterns that you know to make them a little bit more interesting, or to change them so that you're not having to learn a completely different strumming pattern, is changing the accent that you have on the different beats and when you're strumming. The example I like to use is the island strum. It's one of the most popular strumming patterns, and it's popular for a reason. A lot of times it is just the casual like down, down, up, up, down, up, but you can change the accents on it. Rather than down, down, up, down, up, you could have down, down, up, down, up. Notice how I added extra weight, and it feels like those down, down, up, down, up is a lot more interesting than down, down, up, down, up. It's the same strum, but accents make a huge difference. If you're trying to write this out, an easy way you can start doing this is using capital and lowercase letters. Have your strong beat accents or strong downs or strong ups be capital letters, and have all your weaker ones, or the ones that aren't as strong or they're not accented, be lowercase letters. And that's a really easy adaptation you can do with pre-existing strumming patterns you're already using. Another thing you can do is to add a swung beat. When you have a swung beat, it's adding like a jazz feel to your strumming pattern. And basically what you're doing here in the most simplified version is you're taking away a little bit of time from certain beats and adding them to others. You hear this in jazz music. It's very much a learned feel. If you're interested in learning more about specifically what a swung beat is, comment down below and let me know and I can make a separate video about that. And finally, knowing the meter of your piece makes this a lot easier because certain strumming patterns just aren't going to work with certain meters. And I'm not saying you have to know exactly how to identify every single time signature out there, because that is a very learned and practiced skill. However, it's pretty easy to be able to tell whether something is in simple meter or compound meter. I have an entire video that kind of gives the basics of meter, and I'll make sure to link it above. But really basically, a simple meter is something in which the bars feel like they are evenly divided between two equal parts. At compound meter, the bars feel like they are divided into 3 equal parts. And honestly, a lot of times too, people will think songs or have a swung beat when they're actually just in a compound meter and they're not swung at all. So knowing the difference between all that can really help with your musicianship. Now, please remember, like, developing all these skills, it takes time. And for some people, things are going to be more intuitive than others. So if you're ever playing with someone and it just seems like they can pick something up right away, that's awesome for them. Be happy for them, but don't be frustrated with yourself. Again, they may have been doing things with other contents or with other skills in their lives that they, without knowing, are actually pulling over all those different practice skills and then being able to apply them to this new skill of music making. If you take any of these like 6 little skills and then apply it to creating your own strumming patterns, you're gonna be doing really, really well. And your strumming patterns don't have to be super complex or anything, but it is really good practice to just find a song, create a strumming pattern to it, and see how it goes. And with that, a little extra bonus tip I would say is if you can play the song in the original key, play the song with your strumming patterns written out like on a lead sheet or something, even if you have to write it out yourself, and then play along with the song. If it sounds like your ukulele could just be an extra instrument in this, and like the combination of whatever you're doing on in your playing with the original recording sounds really, really good, you probably made a great strumming pattern. That's often what I will do. Almost the final step before I make a tutorial on something is always going to the original and playing along. And if the original is in a different key than what you're playing with, use a capo if you need to, or there are programs out there that you can raise and lower the pitch of the music by half steps and stuff to get it to where you need to be. I hope some of this helped you a little bit. Like I said, if you want a even more distilled version as opposed to the live stream, check out the note sheet I have on my Patreon. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, put them down below. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a like. That tells me you want to see more tips and tricks type videos. And it tells me, especially if you comment with like the questions you have, it gives me a really good idea of like what additional videos I can make to help you with your playing. But thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.